is, what do we need to become a nation? Do we know what exactly we deserve as a country or as a people to become a nation? But also, what role does our history play in making us what we are today, especially along ethnic lines, religion, and when you look at the politics, the constitution, the economy, and our society as we galvanize each other? What have been our shortcomings? What can we look forward to become the nation we all desire that fits and deserves and serves all of us? Let's meet the panel that is putting perspective to this discussion. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sari, the first Deputy Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, is with us this evening. Good evening, Professor, and it's good to have you back.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. I'm happy to be back.
Making a maiden appearance on our show, Arthur Isiko, who is the treasurer at the Uganda Law Society, is with us this evening. Arthur, thank you for joining us, and it's a pleasure having you.
Good evening, viewers. Thank you so much for hosting me. Good evening, fellow panelists.
Next to Arthur is Honorable Medad Lubega Segona, the Member of Parliament representing the people of Busiro East. He's with us this evening. Honorable, good evening, and it's good to have you.
Hello, good evening, Timothy, and to the viewers and my colleagues. I'm pleased to meet my boss, Professor Juma Waswa, with whom I worked for close to 10 years.
Oh.
Yes.
Wow.
I hadn't seen him in a long time. I last saw him in Tribulations, and I said, you have my prayers. And of course, to meet my young and shorter brother, Dr. Chris Baryomunsi, who has also been in the papers doing the job he's paid to do.
Honorable Segona has decided to do the moderator's job by introducing the rest. But Professor Waswa Balunywa, who is a consultant and an economist at that, is with us this evening. Good evening, Professor, and it's good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers, and thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure for me to be with these panelists here, especially Honorable. We've met for some time, yes. Thank you.
That's good. Lastly but not least, the Honorable Chris Baryomunsi, Minister in charge of ICT and National Guidance, representing the people of Kinkizi East. Good evening, Honorable, and it's good to have you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening, viewers. When you say Chinchizi East, you say of Kanungu district, so that people know.
Of Kanungu district.
Yes,
Isn't
there are
that
people in
Ruchiga?
Kanungu in my constituency who don't speak English, but when I'm on TV, they watch and they are very happy.
So do
And
they understand
tell
what
me
you
you
say?
spoke very well, even when they didn't understand what I was saying.
You can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, drop your comment there. Let us know what you think.
They feel represented.
Go to our YouTube channel, drop your comment there, let us know what you think, but also for text or WhatsApp, 0709 60 25 92. Drop your text or WhatsApp on our conversation here. We'll start from everything, our history and our challenges there, then we'll spread our wings all the way back to where solutions need to be found. Professor Balunywa, allow me to start with you, especially looking at how this nation was formed. Different ethnicities brought together, all of them chiefdoms and kingdoms had their own way of running things. The 50s there, as they called him, Jolly Joe, and Ikem Saz came together to try and form a country. There was also trying to federate East Africa. How much does our history play in these states and our desire to become a nation?
Well, good question. I think we need to go back, as you say, into the history, and we see that when Uganda was established as a protectorate, I think in 1873 or 93, something like 94, they brought together a variety of groups. And at that moment in time, the most prominent and powerful was Buganda. And indeed, the name Uganda borrows from the word Buganda. And very interestingly, of course, in 61, they tell you, go and have elections. Now, you have kings, and they're telling you to have elections. It's not surprising that the Democratic Party won the election at that time. And the British woke up. What is happening around us? Remember, they had exiled the Kabaka in the 50s, I think 54.
Yes.
50? 53, and they realized that they could not keep the Kabaka away. So they come together, and DP, being Catholic, having won the election, and the British are Anglicans, they were mad. So they bring together UPC and Kabaka, Kabaka Yeka, to win the 62 elections. Now, you brought groups of people together and you say, become a nation. That's a challenge. Become a nation and hold elections. We had no history of this. We had a history of kingdoms, especially in Buganda and the 5 areas where we had kingdoms. So this was the biggest problem, or the starting problem in Uganda's nation building, that we had not really come together as different groups of people on equal terms, and hence the Buganda question up to date. That the British were very smart. They made the Kabaka the head of state, and they made Obote the prime minister. Now, can you hold elections in a kingdom? It's not possible. So fast forward, today, there is a lot of confusion in the minds of a Muganda who loves the Kabaka, and you are telling them to go and hold elections. So we as individual groups in Uganda must first of all come together and agree that yes, we want to be together as a country. Of course, it's now taken for granted, but you need some kind of parity of the groupings. Because if the kingdom areas feel they want federal, as it was called, which meant giving some authority to the kingdoms to be able to do something, then what do you do with the others? So a number of things have come up. The lawyers will tell you what has come, what they've been trying to do. They decided to do the decentralization as one avenue of creating parity within the country. But it hasn't worked. Buganda still want their king, you know? And that strength of, that passion for the king is a challenge in nation building. Because typically, a Muganda will want the king. And this is the contradiction. That then, can you hold elections in Buganda when there's a king? You can't. And if you go back to 62, the members of parliament were appointed by the king, because you cannot hold elections. So can we have kingdoms, and then can we have areas where we have districts which have elections? We need to iron out this contradiction.
Thank you. And I want us to start from that. Honorable Minister, let me come to you. Especially looking at the dispute that you and I talked about some time back when Tororo decided to split into 3, but also in your area there, I think the late, who was the Minister of State for Defense and Veteran Affairs, the lady, and it was really dependent on Catholics and the Anglicans in that sect, but also ethnicities. When you were on the roadmap trailing with the president, regions demanded for things. So as a government, are you progressing, or you're just managing perceptions in nation building?
Okay, thank you very much, Timothy. Adding on what Professor has clearly elaborated, is that when you draw backwards, we had our traditional cultural institutions, like the Buganda Kingdom, Bunyoro Kitara, Ankole, the chiefdom in Busoga, and we had an elaborate system of managing society. And the colonialists come, and basically they distort what was happening. And for close to 70 years, we were under colonial leadership. Now, in the late 40s and 50s, when there was a claim for self-rule, self-governance, independence, now Ugandans at the time go into forming political parties. basically trying to copy what was happening in the Western world, because the political parties were not really culture of our setup here. The unfortunate bit is that these political parties are formed on the basis of faith and tribe. And that's why it is very prominent in Chigezi, but it was also true across the country, that the DP, because of the intrigue, factionalism, and the fighting within Uganda, the colonialists, the British being Anglican or Protestants, trying to edge out Catholics. Now, the DP party was largely for Catholics. Now UPC becomes for Protestants. Now Kabaka Yeka is for the Baganda, could say the conservative Baganda. So you see, we form political parties not because of our ideological grounding, but largely because of faith, because of tribe or ethnic extract. And that was one of the biggest challenges we started with. And that's why, like Professor said, when elections which were prepared to usher us into independence in March 1961 were held, Buganda boycotted. Now DP wins elections. And then the colonial powers say no. So how can the DP Catholics win? Now they had to organize another election in April 1962, where now UPC, for purposes of this debate, I can say UPC stroke Anglicans now have to go into a marriage of convenience with the Kabaka Yeka, I can say stroke Baganda, to form an alliance to edge out DP. And that actually partly and largely speaks to the confusion and the challenges we have had post-independence here in Uganda. Because you recall that in the independence constitution, there was a provision to have the issue of the lost counties resolved, the Buyaga and the Bugangaizi, through a referendum 2 years after independence. And indeed, when the referendum was held in 1964, and the people resident in those counties opted to go back to Bunyoro, the Kabaka, who was the president, refused to sign. He said, how do I give away part of my kingdom? So there was that confusion between nation state, then the kingdoms, and so forth. And now Obote, Prime Minister Obote, who had the executive powers, says, I'm a prime minister, I will resign. That is what led to the 1966 crisis, where the president and the prime minister disagreed on that fundamental issue, meaning that even the marriage between the UPC and Kabaka Yeka was really just a marriage of convenience, not something that was rooted into UPC for the sake of taking Uganda forward. So the way and of course the way Uganda was formed, it was a process of bringing different nationalities and piecing them together. You have Uganda here, you have Ankole there, you have the Nilotics in the north, you have Karamoja, the Ateke, Karamoja and the Bateso, West Nile. People probably who were like independent of each other, they come together, artificial boundaries are drawn, and they say this is Uganda. And that has definitely been a challenge. There have been an attempt, progressive attempt to appreciate that we are Ugandans, but still, when you have a macroscopic view of the country, people still see themselves as Bachiga, the Baganda, we are from the north, we are Banyoro, that element is still there. So it is a process. We are still continue to build the nation, but because Uganda is a combination and an amalgamation of different nationalities, it will still take a lot of civic engagement, civic education, educating our people to appreciate that sense of patriotism, that even when we are diverse in our faith, in our ethnic extract, in many things, but we must appreciate that we must coexist as Ugandans, There are areas, for instance, where we see emergence of religious sectarianism coming up, like the Chigezo where I come from. When you offer yourself as a candidate, they just say, where does he pray from? We will go for a function, at a religious function. They say, why did he contribute 1 million at an Anglican function and 500,000 at a Catholic function? Those things are there. So we still have a lot of work to do. It is Samora Machel who stated that for the post-African, post-independence African state to thrive, religion must die, tribes must die. Not dying in a sense of killing them and saying no religion, but we must go beyond these small divisions of religion, tribes, and so forth, if we are there to build our nation, Uganda. So, yes, a lot of progress has been realized over time, but challenges still persist, and all of us, irrespective of which space we occupy, we still have a lot of work to do as we build the nation state called Uganda.
It's going to be 64 years of Uganda's independence this year. 40 of those years have been the NRM that is there. There's a lot of public mistrust, especially I was scratched one day and someone jumped out and said, Banyankole mwe. When you look at that intrigue and the undertones that are in the country, why does the public mistrust any person in leadership to be able to forge the nation moving forward?
Well, the theme of today is constitutionalism, patriotism. I want to thank my colleagues who have given us the historical background, but it doesn't stop at that history. As you said, to date, those elements still appear. I must say that there's no problem with someone identifying as a Muganda, as a Msoga, and so on and so forth. Because even if you go to Europe, those tendencies are there. Today, Putin tells you, I'm fighting Ukraine because they are mistreating people who are Russian-speaking. I think quite a number of countries across Eastern Europe, Putin feels a duty to rescue them. If you go to Iran today, you find that they called the Kurds or Kurds. The Kurds, even within the single religion, you'll find their sects. You'll find the Sunnis, the Shias, and so on and so forth. Even when you come to Uganda, you'll find somebody describing himself as Sunni, Shia, Tabligh, and so on and so forth. The only thing that would mitigate all that is the conception of the idea that with all those differences, there are certain things that bind us together in terms of objectives, aspirations, and so on, depending on where we want to go. The issues that have been raised, and that will be constitutionalism, because the constitutional spirit will bind you. The letter of the Constitution will bind you. Constitutionalism, the difference between constitutionalism and the Constitution is that constitutionalism is the spirit. You must inculcate and develop that spirit. For example, if this had been ingrained and well inculcated, we would not have had the 1966 crisis. Because with the federalism especially, where there is a disagreement between the federal state and the nation state, would simply bow the way we do it in court and say, most obliged, my lord, and you walk away. Now those tendencies have continued to date, even when we think we are 64 years independent. I mean, when I have opposed General 7 all my life, when we lose in court, they say, well, what did you expect from Museveni's courts? When he loses, he will blast the judges. When he wins, he says, but the courts have said so. So that spirit of constitutionalism is the answer. Now, the historical bit of it, again, is when we were coming together to form one nation, we were federating. And that is the foundational thing we must understand. With the federation, there were independent states that were coming together, agreeing to form one country and give away or cede part of their power. The difference with decentralization is that power is descending from above down to the local government. I think Professor Colonial attempted to take us there. And now what you will need to understand, especially with the current form of decentralization that we have, is that we decentralized responsibilities and not resources. We decentralized responsibilities and not power. That's why there is even a provision, both in the Constitution and in the Local Governments Act, that, by the way, for some reasons, the executive, the central government may come and take away your power. Why? Because it gave you the powers to you. With the federation, it is the people down that give their power to be governed to the central government. Now, when it came to us, the Federal Constitution, the 1962 Constitution, was abolished unilaterally by one person. And that person did not have recourse to the constitutional order, which would have entailed going, say, to court to say, please, you are the arbiter. Tell us who is right and who is wrong. Now, there continue to be manifestations of the tribal sentiments. As long as you're guided by that, patriotism, the Constitution. If you go to Europe, again, the United Kingdom, the United Kingdoms, the United Nations, until recently, there was an overt war between the central government and the government in Northern Ireland especially. When you go to Wales, they do not see themselves as Britain. Especially when you go to Northern Ireland, it's even worse. At some point, they resorted to war. The solution is be governed by the solution, by a constitution and the spirit, which is constitutionalism. Finally, when you, yes, this concept of elections, it is true that we have these kingdoms and we hold them so dear. It is also true that the method used by the British in giving us power after disorganizing the system they found here, because we were doing it very well. We would even have united, by the way, without them. Because Buganda is a classical example. At some point, Buganda had three counties, Maokota, Busiro, and Kyadondo. But even Kyadondo did not go far. Kyadondo extended as far as Kitezi here. That's why there is called a Chitongole Kitezi, Okutega. That was the fort, and the officer of that regiment was called Mutezi. And his work was to make sure he guards the kingdom against invasion from Bunyoro, here in Kitezi. So, but you can see by the time the British came, we had expanded towards Busoga, we had gone up to Njiru. Towards Zankore, we had moved up to Kabula. But look at the three counties, Kochi, joined Buganda by an agreement. Kabula and Maugola were donated peacefully. Now, whereas there are those counties which were conquered by force, there are those that joined peacefully. So it means, therefore, that if the British had not invaded and attacked prematurely, probably we would still have formed the nation that we have today. That way would have evolved organically. But now it became mechanical. that the person who came and conquered you, whichever way he conquered you, whether by force, at some point by anger, then King Kabarega had to be exiled. You remember they were captured in northern Uganda. By the time they were captured, the biggest resistance was the fort at Dokolo. Dokolo. That's where they were captured from. And who were fighting for them? The Langese. Because the Baganda they had fled with, kept diminishing. This was a war with a powerful state. But the people from Dokolo, the Langese from Lango, were the ones protecting, fighting for these two kings. So the process was hijacked, admittedly. But can we continue lamenting 64 years into independence that, oh, these people forced us together? What is it that we have done, we ourselves, to distinguish ourselves from the colonial masters who had no interest in how we manage ourselves, by the way? It was in their best interest that actually we mismanage ourselves, because that way they would divide us, they would take our resources, and so on and so forth. So I think we should also stop lamenting. How long does it take a human being to understand the importance of a constitution in regulating social order? Chris is my friend for a long time. I was his lawyer before he got spoiled and and ran back to where he belongs. We are that close. No, he didn't pay. It is okay, he didn't pay. It was pro bono. But we shall sort ourselves. But I don't even know which religion Chris professes. I don't know. It took me so long to know that Professor Wasabalunywa was a Juma. Because it's not my business. I don't even know you. I know you as a young man. I know Timothy as a young man who moderates very well. By the way, I'm impressed. I don't know which religion you belong to, because my business. What my business is, he's my treasurer. When I was giving him my vote, I did not ask him, you, which religion, which political party, and so on, because they are so petty and parochial. But how long does that take us to know, especially at the level of leadership?
Thank you. Let me come to Arthur. Arthur, Honorable Segona mentioned the Constitution almost as the glue that can keep these states together. But also he mentioned the systems of governance. When you look at our history and look at the governance we have now, the NRM government tries to balance regions by allocating ministerial roles to different people there. It will try to ensure that each balance of region is covered there. But also the Constitution has been what he says could be the glue. Yes. Can it be the glue that brings social order in this country, but also the system of governance, of really patronage rather than, how does that work?
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, I've listened to my seniors and how they have laid that background, the history. Unlike them, me, I've grown up in the NRM government. I've only seen the NRM government. And I understand they've been giving that history of kingdoms, how we are forced to come together as a nation. And in fact, if you look at the system of governance of kingdoms, it was more authoritarian. In other words, it was the king who was the law. The king could come up with the law, and it was him who could determine how that law could operate and how probably would come up with that law. Of course, when we became a country in 1962, it became a Republican state. And that means we came together as one nation. We put aside the issue of tribalism, that I'm from this area, I'm from this region, and we decided to forge a way forward as a team. And of course, recently, in 1995, we came up with the Constitution. For those who are there, the Constitution is like the binding factor. Because I've said originally, laws were made by kings and probably by chiefs. For example, in Busoga, we didn't have a kingdom, so it was a chiefdom. So probably the elders.
It's the British meaning word.
Yes.
It was the kingdom.
It was a kingdom.
Yeah, the kingdom, yes.
Okay, the history, the history
kingdom.
we have, at least the history I've read, like I've said, yes, the history that I've read says chiefs. But of course, we have seen the transition. We had the Chabazinga, literally, who is, can compare him to the Kabaka. So we have seen the transition. But what I'm trying to say, that we came up with the Constitution in 1995 to superglue and come up with regulations that could actually determine how we operate. Of course, the challenges we have had in this country are because we have a constitution, but we don't have constitutionalism. Yeah, having a constitution and then having constitutionalism, it means that institutions follow the regulations provided for under the constitution. And in this particular case, we have the 1995 Constitution, which, of course, was very categorical in the preamble. It set down that history that we have gone through and how we have reached here. In fact, when we read the Constitution, and we also read history, we see that we have gone through bad times. And those are times we, especially we as the youth, wouldn't actually want to go back to, because when you look at the issue of national development, there is a way it affects development. So when we came up with that constitution, there were key principles that we came up with, and one of them was the issue of rule of law. And by rule of law, basically, it means that people shall be governed by the law, and the law shall be equal before each and every person. Of course, there is that narrative in society that probably some leaders are more superior than the law. And that is a wrong perception, though it is the perception in society. And also there is that perception that a rich person is above the law. Omavu tasinga musango. So those are all narratives that the constitution of this republic came to diminish. To say that no, all that should be put under, and we should appreciate the fact that we should have rule of law. Of course, like any other government, we talked about the modes of governance in the country. We have decentralization. Of course, we have an executive, we have the legislature, and the judiciary. There is also that important principle, especially when it comes to constitutionalism, the principle of separation of powers. And that is very, very important, because it guides how the various institutions, especially the ones that run the country, should operate. That each entity should be able to operate without some, we call it an invisible hand. They should be able to operate independently and perform their duties. My senior here is in the legislature. So in the performance of their duties, in the legislation, when they come up with the laws, they should be able to do things independently without any kind of interference. And of course, the same with the judiciary. And that is why of recent, we have seen the Constitutional Court coming up with the judgment recently on computer misuse, where without even any interference, I've said the legislature in coming up with a certain law, they didn't follow the principles or the procedures, and that is all constitutionalism. Yeah, that when you are governed, you're supposed to follow certain principles. So when the parliament was coming up with the computer misuse, the amended Act of 2022, they didn't follow the procedures. There was an issue of quorum that they didn't actually confirm that at that time there was quorum in reading the regulations and in the passing of the entire act. There was no evidence to that effect. And we see that the judiciary has come up with such a ruling. So we believe that constitutionalism entails such principles: rule of law, separation of powers, and of course protection of human rights. this constitution that we have has an entire chapter 4, we call it chapter 4, which gives the rights, it stipulates the rights of every citizen, the derogable and the non-derogable, the right to life, yeah, the right to engage, association, expression, yeah. So such rights have been protected because of constitutionalism. Of course, there are challenges, as you can see. For example, talk about association, civic engagement. Recently, we had elections. We saw that there was a reduction in the civic engagement of the citizens of the country. If you look at the percentages, almost with the presidential 52, with the local government it was even lower. Yeah, we call that civic engagement. Those are all rights that a person should be able to determine the kind of leadership that should actually govern him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Professor Sarah, when we hear the history that has come from the three gentlemen on the extreme left there, and you also look, we've been here, we've talked about nation building, you and I, and we've tried to find that thing. But there seem to be so many fractures in different areas. Let it be religion, let it be ethnic, let it be tribal, all these fractures. How much have they dented us becoming a nation that we all desire?
Thank you very much, Timothy. I think even your question is a little bit problematic. You see, we are assuming that history is static. Pardon? Yes. So you are assuming that history is something which occurred in the past, and then from there we are moving. History is being constructed on a daily. Okay? That's why you cannot answer this question without going through the different historical epochs we have gone through as a nation. And by the way, when we make analysis of society, as social scientists or as humanities scholars, there are two things you must pay attention to. One is history, two is context. How is the history shaping the context in which the society finds itself in? So if you go back to the concepts we are trying to discuss, for example, nationhood, nation building. And really, nationhood is about people finding a common identity, having allegiance to a nation state. And of course, from the history they have told, you cannot even call Uganda a nation state, because so many states that we put together, or so many nations that were put together to create one state, the Republic of Uganda. So the issue of Uganda is itself a result of a particular history created by colonialism. From colonialism, we go through the period of nationalism and nation building and independence struggle. That's where you now have the different groups coming together, defined by race. We, the Africans, vis-a-vis the rest. Should we be treated like this? So as they were fighting the common enemy, you find some level of cohesion, which also had arisen from people, from the intentional activities, by the way, of the colonial state, of ensuring that they broke up these tribal enclaves, in as much as initially they wanted tribalism, but then they wanted to create a middle class that would take up from them. So you have kids from one corner going to Mwiri, others going to Ontario. So you have that whole process as of trying to manage, and a post-colonial state should there be one. You leave that period where you actually had an attempt at fashioning national identity. You then go into the phase of liberation and counter-liberations after independence. People suddenly remember we came in these things differently, we haven't yet fused. Why do the other group have more jobs than the other? So we go through periods. Of course, when you are talking about this, you don't even just, if you reduce it to Uganda, you lose the common picture. You can compare what happened in Uganda, what has happened in Kenya, what has happened in Nigeria. All these countries go through the same motions, okay? So, of course, you have tribe asserting itself in the post-colonial state. And then as that is being done and people are trying to understand that, then they throw in another spanner in the works, neoliberalism, and the demand that the state should recede, retreat from economic development, retreat from shaping what the society should look like. And as we privatize and we leave it to the market, of course, you have then more foreign forces coming in, either as private investors and the rest shaping the economy, and people trying to identify themselves within these processes until you come to where we are today. So you tend to find at some levels, tribalism is amplified. At some levels, religion is amplified. At some levels, you have the Gen Zs and these people who actually say for them that history doesn't relate to them, because for them what they know is just one system. So what we need to know is that society is a dynamic process, okay? Societies are not static, that we were formed here and therefore anything beyond what we were formed with in 1894 is therefore defective. Society is a constant. It's so always in constant motion. And the bits in society are moving parts. How does colonialism shape the economy and therefore shape how the people relate to that economy? Who has rights, who doesn't have rights, and how does religion come in to enable that? How does post-colonial forces of identity, of liberation, of independence shape themselves? That's why in some countries, people fought for independence as a bigger collective. In some countries, they fought for independence as individuals. But how does then that identification also shape who should take the largest spoils from independence? And then how do people come to be the stereotypes that come up, the religions that come up? That moves to today, where we have full blast neoliberalism and privatization, where you are on your own, except if you belong to a larger social network. So when that happens, because the state is supposed to guarantee people's survival, it's supposed to guarantee people's security, it's supposed to guarantee certain rights as enshrined in the Constitution. And the constitutions are actually well written. But relating with that in life may be different. So when that becomes challenged, then you find people retreat into enclaves where they will find some kind of stability. And that's why you can actually draw a correlation between the rise of high-level evangelical, born-again Christianity with the era of neoliberalism. Massive retrenchment, HIV/AIDS, there was a lot of uncertainty by 1988. So then people retreat to these things. And they're not only retreating to those things in Uganda, it is a continental problem. So when we ask and we reduce it to a process of governance, you have to remember that even governance is being shaped by this process. So when we are talking about now nation building, you know, nation building has to be intentional. And nation building is not just telling people you must respect the Constitution, because also respect for the Constitution is also a moving part, okay? There are times where people think the Constitution is the manna from heaven. If you have it, you have it. There are times when actually people think actually it doesn't count. And I'm not just talking about Uganda, I'm talking about wider processes globally. So as society goes in those kinds of motions, and you are entrusted with nation building, what can you be? And by the way, world over nation building is not a naturally occurring process. It is a state-driven process in shaping the public sphere and what exactly comes of it. When we see things like national parades at these national days, you then have national parades, you have a national anthem, you have a flag, you have a coat of arms, you have the law, you have the Constitution, you have a particular public system, you have a particular education system. All of those are processes towards nation building. So maybe what we should ask is how intentional are they being driven? The issue is not to blame religion or tribe or whatever. Those are things people belong to. They get amplified when they become the recourse for security and stability. But where you have a stable state that guarantees, that's why societies that are very, very advanced, religion actually goes down. Tribal identities may actually go down. Even racism may go down, but sometimes it may go up. And it normally goes up when there's a contestation for resources. So we have to be aware and question at what point of history are we in? What time are we in? Which context are we in? And then that will help us understand, because it's all about belonging. Where do people feel they should belong? Where should their identity be? And what identity and what sense of belonging guarantees rights and privileges? That's why to my neighbor here, belonging to any particular tribe or religion may not be the big thing. Probably belonging to the Uganda Law Society might be the big thing for him, okay? For the older generation, yeah, belonging to certain enclaves may be. To the future generation, I don't know what actually they will. But what we can do as a state is, if we have a state called Uganda, how do we fashion a common identity towards the service of the state? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we take a break, let me come back to the Honorable Minister. And this question is really these 40 years, because we can account from post-independence to where we are, and then 40 years of where we are. How have you performed as government in forming these different regions you've talked about, including Chigezi that you've said, you know, people still look in and ask what tribe, in forming the nation called Uganda?
Yes, if you draw back again, we had the independence constitution. It is overthrown and replaced by a constitution written by one person. President Amin comes in, suspends everything, suspends parliament, bans political parties, he rules by decrees. Then you get Obote. Again, he follows the constitution which Amin had put in abeyance. Then NRM comes, so the 40 years start. And 1995, we have the 1995 Constitution, which has driven us for this period. And my view is that we have done fairly well in terms of trying to achieve national integrity, despite what we are saying, given how we started. But over time, Ugandans now appreciate that even when we are diverse in different ways, but we have common values, we have common interests, and I think we have tried to forge that national unity. For instance, when you look at NRM over time has become a national party. That's why you will find it having representation from Western Uganda, representation from the north, representation from the east, representation from the center. It has that national character in nature. And it has tried to galvanize that unity. So in the last 40 years, and as you know, NRM is built on 4 ideological pillars. Pillar number 1 being patriotism. And this was deliberately crafted based on the history which we have described, that when the political parties came, they were formed on the basis of grievances related to faith, related to ethnic affiliation and so forth. So NRM tried to cure. So even when we say there are still tendencies of religious, sectarianism, tribal, but I think they are on a declining trend compared to where we started from. So to answer your question, how have we fared in the last 40 years? I would say we have made reasonable progress in the right direction. So
okay, let me read some feedback and we shall come back to that, especially looking at the smirk on Honorable Seguna's face. I hope you'll give us an answer on that. Thank you, Timothy, for the show and for the topic. I'm Lumumba, following from Arua. I have 2 questions. How does constitutionalism shape the principles and the structure of a nation? In what way can patriotism either strengthen or weaken citizens' commitment to upholding those constitutional values? Okay. To what extent is authentic nation building dependent on the balance between constitutionalism, patriotism, and what are the risks of one emphasized at the expense of the other? Very pertinent questions there. Timothy, please ask Dr. Chris. He has given us a very clear microscopic analysis of the genesis of Uganda's politics. I have learned and understood where we came from as a country. Okay, thank you for watching. Opolot Ignatius from Entebbe. Lastly, before we take a break, greetings to the panel. And these are your fans from Chigezi. I don't think they're writing in English, but I'll understand what they're saying. Lastly, this is from Kasese. I am being honest, today's panel is very attractive one with the intellectual pulse that is there. I dare not to miss the discussion and how informative it is. Thank you very much for appreciating the show. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be dissecting where we are as a country, but also what are the solutions that can galvanize us to come together.
So, Muchala.
Yes, Daddy.
You know the children are going back to school and things are a bit tight. Huh? For now, why don't you take half of the fees to junior school, and for the school van contribution, we shall pay later.
Daddy, why don't we pay using MTN Momo, where we stand a chance of winning school fees for a whole year and more? By the way, you can also apply for a school fees loan, and also participating schools can win a school van.
That's right! Win school fees for a whole year and more. Get Momo goodies and a school van for participating schools. You can also apply for a school fees loan. Simply dial *165 *80# or use the Momo app.
For 100 years, Nyakasura School has shaped minds, built character, and raised generations of leaders.
My name is Patriotism. I'm the chairman of the alumni, and I am delighted to be telling you today that on the 26th of March, we celebrate something truly extraordinary. We have invited His Excellency, the President of Uganda, to come and join us as we mark 100 years of this school. So I call upon every old boy to make a contribution. Whatever it takes, let's make this a historic moment.
Send your donation to Equity Bank account 101320303891. For details, contact Samuel Kazova on 0772636293. Nyakasura School, celebrating 100 years of excellence.
Uganda, get ready for an unforgettable experience. Join thousands of runners and culture lovers at the Mbarara City Marathon 2026, happening Saturday, the 28th of March 2026, starting at 6 a.m. at Mogaba Palace, Kamukuzi in Mbarara City. This year's theme proudly celebrates the biggest culture and heritage of the long-horned cattle in the land of honey and milk, a symbol of identity, pride, and tradition in Uganda. Come and run through the cultural heartland where heritage meets tourism and sport. Choose your race: 42 kilometers, 21 kilometers, 10 kilometers, or 5 kilometers. The guest of honor will be the Minister for Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, highlighting Uganda's rich culture and tourism. Register today and get your marathon kit at www.mbararacitymarathon.com or dial *272*11#. Proudly sponsored by Tascalite, Grace and Family Concepts, Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, Uganda, Nyakayojo Sacco, Explore Uganda, Textile and Prom Home, Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, Emburada Farm Lodge, Country Cinema, Arch Motors, and many more. For more information, call 0785-408-422. Mbarara City Marathon 2026, running to celebrate the culture and heritage of the long-horned cattle in the land of honey and milk.
The government's core mandate is to maintain law and order, safeguard citizens' rights, and provide essential public services.
Remember, one of the pillars of a roadmap is innovation and entrepreneurship.
There has been this question of how are you protecting our indigenous seed?
It's going to be a tall project that answers somebody's question.
The Front Bench has brought you insightful discussions on governance, security, healthcare, justice, and commerce.
Why do you go through this complicated procedure, involve the lawyers? You bring the case against him, the judge will hear you out and pass judgment, and you're out of court in record time.
We remain committed to keeping you informed and engaged on key national matters.
So these are huge, these are powerful organizations which now Uganda chairs. Why don't you come together?
If we haven't migrated to the e-card because of various reasons, including that not all the people of Uganda have smartphones.
You can sit in your house, apply for a passport.
If you have a Ugandan who has a successful logistics firm in the US, it means he can come to Uganda and do a lot more.
Every Monday at 8:30 p.m. with me, Jethro Kasaiji, your interface with the government only on your public broadcaster, UBC, Inspiring Uganda.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. I'm joined with an exceptional panel, and we're discussing nation building alongside constitutionalism and patriotism of this country. Where can we get that and galvanize our country come together? But let me read these two messages and then come back to the minister there. Thank you, the team from Behind the Headlines. The issue highlighted are more important to have on our Uganda's rise to the next generation. Honorable Segona has said that he has opposed the NRM all his life. The biggest challenge with Uganda's opposition is lack of ideological strategy, like the NRM. Why do you fight your own opposition members when you're understanding the fighting in the ruling party? Like now, you would be planning. Interesting. Lastly, good evening, Timothy. In Uganda's context, constitutionalism, patriotism, nation building are interconnected, and constitutionalism provides a framework for governance, while patriotism inspires citizens to prioritize national interests. National building leverages on those elements to promote unity and development. President Museveni emphasizes patriotism, Pan-Africanism as key to Uganda's prosperity. However, challenges persist such as diminishing national pride, religionism, and ethnic divides. Experts advocate for constitutional reforms, promote unity, language, and address historical grievances there. Honorable Chris, we have seen our history, we have seen the 40 years of the NRM, and we're still not moving in our desired direction. What makes the NRM the most exceptional party to get us there?
Well, like I have said, NRM was formed as part of the answer to the challenges we're facing, especially post-independence. If you read the writings of President Yoweri Museveni, as a young person, as a student, he was observing how Uganda was being governed. You recall even when he stood for elections in 1980, he kept challenging the status quo, threatening to go to the bush and establish a new constitutional and democratic order in Uganda, which he did. And he did, that's what informed the ideological principles and pillars of the NRM, which include patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy. And whatever NRM does, whatever interventions are done by NRM, they are anchored on those pillars. For instance, democratic practice of having elections every 5 years with an effort to keep improving the quality of those elections. It's grounded in that principle. When you look at the life of Uganda, it is answering to that pillar. And if you look at the style of leadership and management by the president, like somebody had commented, when he's, for instance, forming government, like we expect him to do in May, June, he ensures that the different nationalities we'll be describing are represented. You will find the ministers, maybe the cabinet has somebody from Karamoja, from Western Nile, from Chigezi, from Buganda.
Is it so that, Honorable Minister, is it representation or competences? Because we, unfortunately, you and I were here when Honorable Mara was seated exactly where Honorable Segona is seated, and we're discussing the speakership of Parliament. Yes. He said the president is from the West, the vice president is from the East, the third in command is from the East. He went on to say the fourth in command, who is the deputy speaker of Parliament, is from the West, and said, no, Honorable Mao is trying to fit into that arrangement. Aren't you just making these religions and tribes in a new form now?
No, there are positions which are elective, like speaker, like deputy. Then there are those which are appointive. But at least you know it has been his style and culture to balance the different interests. For instance, of course he looks at competence, but fits that competence into representation of different interests. For instance, would you be happy, given the reality in Uganda, to have maybe a cabinet of professors from Chigezi who are Catholics, and that's the cabinet? Do you think Ugandans would be happy? Much as they may be professors, very competent, but they are from Chigezi, and maybe they are one religion. It wouldn't work. So yes, competence first, but also ensure that the different interests are represented. Like say the army. When we were growing up, we knew soldiers, the Ugandan army, were from the greater north of Uganda. That's how the colonialists had constructed the arrangement. This had to be reversed. Now there are quotas from every district when UPDF is recruiting to ensure that the Bafumbira from Kisoro are there, the Rugubara from Western Nile are there, the Karamajongo are there, the Basamia from Busia are there, so that it becomes a national army, not an army that is representing one ethnic group. So I think NRM has tried to its level best to integrate the nation so that we all see ourselves as part of the process of building this nation. And the spirit of constitutionalism is there to a large extent. The example the lawyer Law Society was saying, where the courts, I think yesterday or the other day, nullified sections of the Computer Misuse Act. You see, in legislation, much as individual backbench members can bring a law, but the executive largely initiates legislation. We propose legislation, and then the parliament now legislates, enacts a law. The president assents to it. It has said no, these sections of the law, the process of passing them didn't meet the basic benchmarks. The benchmarks. There was no quorum in the parliament. There's some element of infringement of human rights, and now it gets back to us. Like we are going to discuss with the Attorney General either to appeal the decision or rewrite the law and bring it back, because it comes from my sector of ICT. So that's constitutionalism, that's rule of law, ensuring that the constitution which we put in place can work. You commented on the issue of amending the constitution. The constitution is a living document. Chapter 18 of the constitution speaks to amendment, and there are provisions of how the constitution can be amended. So, and I don't see any problem with that, because those who wrote the constitution did so, 95, and they said those in the future who will be there, should they feel there is a need to amend any of these provisions, there are those which are entrenched, there are those which are not entrenched, this is how you will do it. And as long as we follow the constitutional and lawful processes to amend the constitution, there should be no cause for worry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let me come to Professor Balinyua. In the 50s, when Jolly Joe was trying to canvass the country, the slogan was independence now. When we got to when the Kabaka had been sent away, the slogan was the Kabaka must be brought back, and this galvanized the country everywhere. What is the one thing that can galvanize these states to become a nation?
I think it is patriotism, but we need to define it. The Constitution, has been rightly said, first of all, the 1995 Constitution was, the formation process was wide consultation, and indeed it's a wonderful Constitution. But when you look at the practice, sections of society felt they had been robbed, especially the sections where there were kingdoms. They were never happy with it, and they are still not happy with it. So, and NRM, I must say, have been very smart at this, because Obote removes the federal, creates a republic, maintains the republic, Obote comes back, maintains the republic, and in 1993, we restore kingdoms as cultural institutions. And in 1995, we enact a constitution, proclamation, a constitution, which is a republic constitution. And so the issue of the spirit of constitutionalism will not be there until those groups which have, feel that it does not accommodate them have been accommodated. That is when you can say, yes, we are now a nation, and we can be proud about this nation.
Professor, what are some of those grievances that those...
It's essentially federal. It's essentially federal. It's the federal states which feel you should have taken care of our interests. I'm sure Honorable Seguna will talk about that. The federal states feel that the 95 Constitution, wonderful Constitution, took a lot of time, but those interests were not taken care of. And I don't think there is, I mean, look at the restoration of the kingdoms. What does President Museveni say as we restore the kingdoms? You know, where is the Ankole kingdom in all this? So these groups still feel that we must be accommodated in the Constitution. But to accommodate them, you would create a society which is not equal. And therefore, it's very important to continue to talk and resolve the issues of federal. When you resolve the issue of federalism, so that you can say we can have elections in Uganda, I don't know how Honorable Seguna goes for elections in Uganda. He must explain this. How can you support the Kabaka and at the same time go for elections? It's a contradiction. Until that contradiction is removed, you cannot have patriots in this country. So Honorable Seguna is not a patriot because he believes in Uganda as a kingdom, and like many other people from kingdom areas who believe in their kingdoms, and at the same time, okay, we are now Ugandans. So it is patriotism, the love for our country, that will make us build a nation. But we must resolve those small issues, not small, major issues of how do we accommodate kingdoms? How do we accommodate them? Remember, the kingdoms have no capacity to tax. There is no government. If it has no capacity to tax, you can call a government. Even the districts, the local administrations, that small taxation they used to have was taken away. So there was over-centralization of authority, and this impacts on patriotism, on constitutionalism. The other bit is the level of poverty in the country. I mean, if 80% of your people are in rural areas, 70% on agriculture, producing for self-consumption, you cannot start talking about constitutionalism to them. About 25 million Ugandans have never achieved P7. Wow. So that socio-economic transformation, which is a pillar in the NRM ideology, must be achieved so that the issues are no longer religion and tribe. The issues is there food on my table. Can I get a job? Now, the underpinning factor here is ideology. Before we talk about patriotism, we must explore ideology properly. And the NRM ideology is still lacking.
What is that one idea that we can line ourselves together and say, and we're not looking at each other as tribes or as religion, but we are galvanized by, you've said patriotism, but what is that one idea that when it resounds in the West, in the North, in the East, it is the same message?
An equal opportunity to access to education, to transform society.
So an equal opportunity for everyone,
yes,
can be the binding factor for this country. Thank you very much.
NRM has provided that.
We shall come to the numbers that Honorable Minister. Honorable Seguna, I saw you having a smirk when the Honorable Minister was speaking. I'll let you say something about that before I pose a question.
No, I think at a purely theoretical level, Chris is right. Because I've also been around and heard President Museveni talk about patriotism, Pan-Africanism, and so on and so forth. As to whether he practices the same is an entirely different matter. And I only came here to discuss or engage in debate with respect and without making reference to particular individuals. But if I started breaking down and dissecting how President Museveni has deviated from what he has been preaching over the years, I think one night is not enough for all of us. All I can say is this. I think, one, both at the level of reality and perception, we need to move forward. Because, I mean, if it is patriotic to amend the Constitution and remove term limits, and the only person who has ruled for 2 terms as enshrined in the Constitution is General Museveni, and he's the only one who is going to benefit from the amendment. If that is patriotism, I will have to look for my school fees from my English teachers, and they pay it back. If we are going to amend the Constitution to remove age limit, and the only person who has hit the ceiling of age, and therefore the intended beneficiary of that amendment is General Museveni, and you call that patriotism, I will still look for those people to refund my fees. If you're going to have, if you have a president who says, yes, I signed this Constitution, but it's just a mere piece of paper, and you think you're going to promote constitutionalism that way, when the chief priest of the country is telling you this is nothing but a mere piece of paper. And then Chris comes here to debate with me and he says, this is, the NRM has done perfectly well. If I marked my students that way 15 years back, Barunya would have fired me. Okay? There are so many examples that you would talk about to say, I think we all sinned and we fell short of God's glory. We should simply repent. Now, this is a question that has been asked by Professor Balunya of how you can be patriotic and then you're saying there should be a king. I think that is what is called patriotism. Because when they were restoring these, the traditional institutions, I was in senior 3, or senior 5 maybe, when they promulgated this constitution in 1995. They said, first of all, that these institutions are restored in those areas in accordance with the cultures, customs, and aspirations of the people concerned. If I am opposed to Ankole Kingdom, but I'm not one of those concerned, I have no business. That's number one. Number two, they were restored in accordance and subject to the Constitution and other laws. Now, the Constitution and other laws provide that there shall be elections, and that these elections shall be held or conducted in accordance with the laid down principles and provisions of the law. Even those of us, the Federalists, we do not find any contradiction with democracy. I mean, I think now for today there are examples. In England, there is a king. I was going to say there is a... Yes, but that king, even before the Queen, had a share of the taxes. Because it is, you see, it is his people that pay these taxes. So the king in England does not have to go and also impose a tax, but a portion. Now here they crafted it in a way that actually this person or this institution, because it's an institution, it's a corporation soul, shall not pick a penny or shall not live off the public sweat. Now, if you want him sustained, he's been a prime minister in the kingdom of Busoga. He knows how we've been surviving over the years. I was a minister in the kingdom in Uganda. We rarely, although we believe we should, but we rarely inconvenience the public purse. But what is so difficult about sustaining these institutions with the public purse? At some point, President Museveni, when he was making a case for supporting political parties using public funds, he said, if we actually don't give them public funds, they will look for funds from elsewhere, and this will disorganize us. I thought that statement was patriotic enough. Now, when it came to supporting the institutions, and this is where we differed, General Museveni's government was saying, we shall give a salary to the office holders, the kings. I think at that point they were paying 5 million. The Kabaka of Uganda said, no, I don't want that money. What I want is money that goes to these people, the disadvantaged communities, subject of ours. Those are the ones who should give the money. In other words, give the money to the institutions at an institutional level, and they should be held accountable to that. Now that is the difference, and Chris has been talking about how you give ministries, jobs. I can say jobs. Someone from Karamoja, I would not even mind if you did not appoint a single Muganda in your cabinet. I don't mind, provided.
You'll be the first one to make a noise.
No.
You want to have a second?
I'm saying I will not be bothered. If I wanted the problem, I would be somewhere.
But the Waganda would be bothered.
Well, I'm one of them, and I speak more for them than you do.
No, you'd be by now.
You see, my concern is this. First, look at competence. And I disagree with you when you say, oh, he looks at competence, but also balancing. Look at the quality of our ministers. At some point, I said in Parliament, but I wanted to be decent to keep within the rules of Parliament. Decorum, when I said, well, our ministers, by our standards, are okay. Because these are the standards we have set for ourselves. We set off for less. Look at your cabinet. Even the president himself, who owns this cabinet, said, I appointed the people he described as potato growers.
No, he said fishermen.
Fishermen, actually fishermen.
Who had been elected by Ugandans.
Having been born and raised around Entebbe, I know what fishermen look like. So when I look at you, Chris, now, I have a proper reflection of what I saw as a growing up young man in Ichituru. But the point, beyond that, the point is this. I mean, let's live to reality. I stay in Buddo, along Masaka Road. I used to teach in Mubs, along Ginger Road. And he used to give me lectures, including on Sunday. So I had occasion to drive along the two roads. And I know the number of sirens going to Masaka. I also know those going to Ginger. And there is not so much tourist attraction that takes people to Masaka on Friday and Saturday, and then bring them back on Sunday and early morning on Monday. The words spoken by both Chris and the president are very good. What we see in practice is deplorable. And that is not to say that the Baganda in Masaka, because General Museveni is a Muganda of Gomba, are benefiting so much from his government. Probably the Baganda of Masaka and Gomba, where President Museveni comes from, are very hardworking during his regime, and therefore they deserve to have what they have. Probably some of the things we see are exaggerated. Probably some of the people know how to enjoy the little power they have. So much so that the Baganda of Masaka feel a lot of power even when they don't have any. The ground, I mean, the thrust of the matter should be, how do we empower institutions? But including by empowering those ministers. Some of these ministers are even more miserable. So if you think that appointing somebody a minister makes him any different, they are even more miserable than you, Timothy, or myself. Why? Because President Museveni does not empower his ministers. He does not empower institutions. At some point, Honorable Mama Mbabazi said, and I proudly supported him in 2016 when we were fighting those ones. And he said, you will find you take a cabinet decision. For every ministry, there is a corresponding secretary in State House. the secretary is either somebody who has recently defected to NRM, and the secretary will write a letter reversing a decision you took in cabinet. If we removed...
Prime Minister position when he was coordinating.
You come from the same village,
But
you will ask
but he
him.
never raised it.
You will ask him, and I'm sure today he's powerful enough that you cannot ask him that question. So the point is here.
He has no answer for it.
Well, probably he will give it to you. But and it is true. You have seen how people come and take over, overrun institutions, including courts of law. We've been talking about courts of law. Today you cannot execute a court order or a judgment if an assistant RDC says no. Forget. You can run around with your court order and the assistant RDC will say, no, I'm not for, I'm trying to go back to constitutionalism and patriotism. Constitutionalism entails that even when you disagree with the decision of a competent institution and authority, you must obey. Now, President Museveni has promoted a culture of impunity that people do not respect institutions as long as they know they are covered. I have so-and-so's back. I mean, that one destroys the country, that one destroys the spirit.
Okay.
I don't think General Museveni believed in those things he's talking about in 1980 when he was running for presidency and probably membership to parliament. You know, it was conjoined in 1980. So much so that when he lost, he decided to go and fight. There were courts of law even during that time. Why didn't he go to court? Did he find a single judge in the bush? No. There was no judge in the bush. The judge was in the gun. And he resorted to the gun. I think there is something called, is it the hegemonic theory in politics? That we know, and it was echoed by Kelsen, Hans Kelsen. Every person who has gone through law school knows this, that once somebody captures power, whether illegitimately or otherwise, he becomes the legitimate source of authority. Why? Because the positivists believe that law and sanctions are intertwined. If somebody issues a directive, whether he's right or wrong, and he's able to coerce you to comply, he's the legitimate source of law, so he can do anything he wants.
Okay, thank you. Let me come to Arthur. Arthur, last week, something I was reading says that the labor in this country is between 20 and 23 million. It also goes on to say that the growth rate of this country's population is at 3%, but it talks about 12% unemployment. And longer term unemployment is at 49%. Underemployment is at 20%. 9.3 million Ugandans, unutilized labor. Then it goes on to speak about youth who are not trained, not employed, not educated. They are 50%. In this state of nation building.
What's the source?
This is Ministry of Internal Affairs. I told you about it last week. When you hear these statistics, and as a young person, and see that 80%, which was 55% of 0 to 18, then 19 to about 33, which is 22%, and you look at this youth population that is in boom, how do we leverage on our young people to build a nation that we all desire and we all can live in?
Yes, I think that statement is so true, because even in our profession, it is quite evident, especially when there are job offers, especially in the judiciary. If you look at the number of applications, especially for one to become a judicial officer, in 2017 they needed around 9 judicial officers.
9?
9. 9. but more than 400 lawyers applied.
Wow.
So that just shows you how bad the situation is. And of course, even recently, I normally see my brothers and sisters applying to get positions. I'll speak so much in the judiciary because that's the angle that I know. The numbers are huge. So that just points to one issue, that the employment levels are high. And that, and with law, there is at least some leverage, because a lawyer, as long as you have a practicing certificate, you can easily get clientele and probably pursue a certain cause, and somehow you get a living. But then there are also other courses that you see, and we have quite a number of them, where someone graduated and 5, 10 years down the road, someone has never got employment, despite the fact that they apply to get employment. So this is a sour reality. And of course that is because of the fact that our education system still trained us, one, either to be job seekers. Someone pursues a course, but at the back of their mind, they know that I need to finish school, then apply. And either I'm employed somewhere and I work. And that system, of course, if you look at the history, it is because of the way the whites wanted to probably manage society, that you go and work in a mine, you work in a factory. So that is the setup that actually we have been brought in. And we have also seen probably our parents, they cherish so much the issue of employment. But I think the solution lies in changing, one, the education system, and of course that will have a bearing on the mindset. If people are trained probably to get skills, yeah, if they train people to have skills. In Uganda, when someone pursues a skill, they look at them as academic failures. If you pursue a course probably of a vocational skill, let's say plumbing, name it. People perceive it that one is an academic failure. Probably you dropped out in P7 and is just trying to make ends. But the sour truth is that probably if we invested so much in skills, it could probably help our economy and could actually boost the economy of this country. Of course, not forgetting that we should take advantage of our setup as Uganda. We are geographically located in a place that can actually facilitate agriculture. Of course, these days we have challenges that people in the villages, in as much as they try to pursue agriculture, because like you say, the majority of them are in the agriculture sector. They rely so much on plowing and getting something. Of course, majority of them, it is subsistence, garden to mouth. But if the government also injected money and probably gave them a hand and boosted them as probably as a community, because for example in Busoga you'll find some regions they do a lot of probably engaging in growing of groundnuts. You find others growing maize. So if probably the government assisted such people and gave them that boost, it could actually help and pursue economic development in the long run.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Professor, you mentioned, history is in the making all the time as we're moving. You also mentioned that, we don't have to look at it in different facets, but we need to look at it in the two aspects you spoke about. But let's come to the diversity that we have as a country. Almost 55 or 54 tribes in this country. And we're all diverse with different ethnicities, different cultural norms. How do we galvanize our diversity to be a strength in building this nation?
But Timothy, I think that's where I started from. That to understand society, you need history and you need context. So our context is diverse. Our history is that we have evolved over a longer period of time. I think there is a danger when you want a single silver bullet to resolve a multifaceted problem like that. Like you ask someone, I think it was Professor Walunyo, you asked, what's that one thing? There's no that one thing in society. Society has to be looked at holistically. You begin by understanding. I know examples have been given here about the British state, and compare it with this one. They are different contexts, and they have been formed by different histories. One was an imperial power, one was a colonized power. Of course, the UK fought the Wars of Roses, which was 500-year wars. They managed to obliterate diversity. You have the king there as the head of state. He appoints the prime minister, he assents to bills in parliament. So the king there is not like kings here, okay? We have also seen different understandings of federalism. Understanding federalism in Uganda is about kings. Understanding federalism in other countries on the continent is not necessarily about kings. It is about territorial power. In Ethiopia, it's more about territorial power. In Nigeria, it's territorial power, but also with some levels of kings. What the literature shows is that where you have had federations or federalism on the African continent, it has been good for linguistic diversity. It accommodates that diversity, okay? But has not been very great at economic progression. It has not been very great at equal access to power. It has not been very great to conflict. Actually, in many places, it has been the source of conflict. So we should not look at one thing and imagine that one thing is what will resolve this society. What you need is to sit and understand what are the diversities. I know we said everyone wants to tell us how the 1966 Constitution was good. But the mere fact that it failed means it was not answering the issues of society, because there were contestations. The big four kingdoms vis-a-vis the rest. And that exploded the way it exploded. Up to now, we are still fashioning a society. We are still fashioning a kind of constitution that serves to that society. At one point, you think you have it, another point, you are changing it. So I think this is not to make us so disappointed with who you are. It is to make us be intentional, first, at understanding the society, two, at not importing templates to explain what the society is. And I think most of the time in Africa, we fail because we are permanently picking templates. You go there, you think it is so nice, you think you'll bring it, boom, and you want to superimpose it. Society does not work like that. For you to make sense of society and put it on a path of progression, you have to understand the internal contradictions in that society. As long as we evade understanding the internal contradictions, you will never understand why those who rule the society rule it the way it is. That's why I want to applaud what the minister said. You know, having understood the internal contradictions of, for example, this society, the state over the last 40 years or whatever we are counting has been intentional about building a national army, okay? So that national army is governed by quotas so that there's not one tribe that dominates it. And it's governed by certain rules that the rest of us are freed from, okay? The only problem is beyond the army, the rest was left to neoliberalism. Free fall, find yourselves. And there then people fashion their ways in who should be where, okay? But if the state actually applied the same to ensuring that there's a balance here, actually, if you rule Uganda, you must do balancing. If you don't balance, you're going to have an explosion, or you'll have an implosion from within. That's why people can say a lot about Singapore, for example, but next door are states which are not Singapore, but they are managed differently, by the same groups of people. So I think we need to understand that every society is unique. It's true we can pick good examples from elsewhere, but we have to tailor them to the kind of society that we want. So we also need to remember that one of the things that has befallen Africa with the neoliberal era is arrested growth. You have the 60s and 70s phase where states are in charge of shaping what they want. And by the way, when I talk about growth, we're not just talking about economic growth in terms. You also have to be able to shape your educational institutions. Why those who colonized us quickly ran to organize these higher education institutions where some of us belong to, it was not by accident. It's because they were out to rule a particular kind of people. So the Nairobis, the Makereres come initially as technical colleges, but when they realize many are going to America and are coming back with the liberation kind of sentiments, they align all of them to the University of London. So you have to be able to shape the education, shape the economy, shape the society in one direction. And that calls to ideology that Professor Walunya talked about. So if you don't do that, and then we are here running around, today people are reading American literature, British literature, and the rest, and the rest, and the rest, and everyone is coming back with the different ideas from where they have come from, and they superimpose. That's not the way to manage a very highly diverse and sophisticated society like Uganda. You have more than 50 ethnicities. You have more than, I mean, I don't know how many religions you have. There's tribes, they are different. There are those of us who are older, there are these younger ones who actually don't give a damn about tribe and religion. So, and you see new classifications are coming all the time. So whoever knows it has to be alive to these and always pay attention to these, okay? So that they move. I know the common thing people want to say that the education system is a problem. Actually, it's not a problem. We have so many people qualifying from the technical colleges. You have so many people coming from the universities. What is lacking is the demand for that kind of labor force. It's not that the labor force is coming up very unskilled. You are graduating around 40,000 people from different higher education institutions. You're creating 700 jobs. Definitely, however well skilled they are, as long as the economy is not there to absorb them, there will be a problem. That's why now I think the state is exploring with competence-based curriculum. We have to do it all the way to education, to university level, so that people come out and fashion their own jobs. There's no magic where you can fit 40,000 per year into 700 jobs. Most of those jobs created in the private sector with their own dynamics and sheltered from the dictates of the state of equal opportunity and all that kind of thing. So it's not very much a question of education, it's very much a question of the economy. What economy are we building? And if you want to build a particular kind of economy, what taxation should move with that economy? With that economy to enable growth, okay? What kind of safety nets do you provide for people there? Otherwise, if we leave people to take loans and then the banks are ripping them off and many men are committing suicide because they have bank loans, of course that cannot build. When people are into borders and the rest, and then you have an education sector, which is, that's why we should pay attention each time we read about the boatloads of Africans dying in the Mediterranean. Because the economy is in one direction, the education is in another direction, and people are suffering like that. So we should not see this as a discussion of Uganda, but it's actually a discussion of because what is in Uganda is everywhere on this continent. It is shaped by a particular history, but also shaped by a certain kind of context. So it is not just about, okay, so what is that thing we should do about diversity? Every African country is diverse, right? They're very, very diverse, apart from the small ones like Rwanda and Burundi. The majority are diverse, and each of the rulers there is struggling in a particular way. Each one is fashioning a model of containment. And it is really a struggle, it's a balancing act. But let us understand the context, let us be alive to the internal contradictions and plan with those in mind, not to superimpose models and templates and think it will work, it will explode.
Finally, Professor, because you mentioned understanding our society, you also mentioned the economy, but also the context and the change, the diverse changes that keep coming, especially when you mentioned Arthur and I, we are expecting different things. Our expectations are different. They're not looking at the past, not looking at...
You don't even want to know about the past.
We are... But the question that I put to Professor Balunyua, and I still want to ask you, because Tanzania had the Umoja. Singapore had a system that they decided to go. What is that thing? Because...
What is the population of Singapore? It is a city-state. And actually, those who have compared Singapore with its neighbors, India and Malaysia, will tell you that the model of Singapore would never have worked there. The neighbors were actually fashioned differently. And that's what I'm saying, pay attention to detail. Under Nyerere, Tanzania actually went that particular way. But now actually it has gravitated back, coming closer to where we are, okay? Because it's no longer Ujamaa, okay? And Ujamaa was also achieved through a fairly Stalinist model, parents to one side, grandparents to another, children to try and fuse and mix up. You could never do that in Uganda and succeed with it.
Because you mentioned something and talked about the economy, the education, and all of them are going in different... What would be the focal point for those to start to move in a...
It's not about to start. First of all, I started by saying that Uganda as we know it today, or the African state as we know it today, is a colonial creation. These people managed themselves in their tribes and in their kingdom, and they had fashioned their culture over thousands of years. By the way, that's why the states have not managed to undo a lot of what they call tribalism. Because these are systems that had run with particular norms and beliefs and laws and systems and economies for thousands of years. Then the white man comes and says, I want to put you together, okay? And in some places, that process is heavily forced. But on that, he creates new institutions for the new generation. The school, the Gombolola headquarters, the hospital, the religion, and religion actually played a big role. And that's why you should pay attention to anthropology and what's written about this country. The things we know as Mulago and Mengo, particularly Mengo Hospital, they just didn't come to treat people. One of the reasons of Mengo's coming up as a maternity unit was to cut the umbilical cord from the African and culture, because of the belief that an African was born already saddled to culture, with an umbilical cord, to the devil. So if the child, and by that they made it illegal to do deliveries in the society, so that all deliveries had to be in hospital. The mother had to be kept in hospital with her baby for 3 months because the baby had to live baptized. So these are a very intentional group of people to break what they have found and create something new. So until as states we are able to know that nation building does not occur naturally, it is an intentional process. There must be an ideology and a force to drive people to that ideology. For example, you cannot be talking about nation building in the same vein with kingdoms, because nation building requires you to subject your individual and group interests to the nation. The first thing we need to ask, what is the nation? Where are we going as a nation? So how can I, as a Muganda, as a Mugisu, as a Samia, remove those things and focus on this one nation we are building? So it will require actually dealing with certain things. That's why the post-independence regimes were perceived to be so aggressive to those kingdoms that they found there, okay? In some countries like Kenya, they totally obliterated them, you cannot even find them. So it is about finding a direction, and this direction has to be formed by people like Honorable Chris Bariomonsi, because you're in charge of information, national guidance, and whatever, and you are the one in the government in power. So for the mandate you're getting for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, where do you want us to go? And then how do you rally the education, the economy, and everything to that particular agenda? You cannot rally there when we are simply discussing politics as we want it to occur, as we saw it occur in Trump land, and then the economy as we saw it where we have visited. We can't just run around with different templates. There must be an agenda of where I want to go. And that's why, like, if you're in primary school, at our times, we sang the national anthem, we recited certain things. Assemblies were a thing of every school. Today, with the private schools, who's going to sing the national anthem and who's going to have assembly? Nothing. So we have to fashion things in a particular direction. But we have to know what is that direction and what is our goal and destination. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me read some messages before I give you your parting shots. Timothy, thank you for the show. I like what Professor said. We must understand society. I believe that each of the panelists has children or grandchildren who are Gen Zs. The focus of these people could be engulfed with industries like sports, entertainment, government, and could solve high unemployment problems. This is James from Buddo. Okay? Thank you, Timothy, for the show. I like what Honorable Segona has said. Honorable Segona, this reminded me someone who gave you their daughter on the show. And I would like Honorable Segona, I like what he has articulated in the issues, and he has a lot of federalism embedded in him. Atenyi from Busunju in Mitiana. Okay?
The message himself.
Giving it Timothy, NRM is absolutely protecting the gains of prioritizing regime survival over the rule of law. Everything that keeps their grip on power is normal to them, whether good or bad. This is at Rinda Timothy in Makere. Okay? I am from Kanungu. Our country is governed well because our neighbors from DRC leave their homes every year to come to our country. Okay? Perspective. Lastly, we have in Uganda, the problem we have in Uganda is tribal and racial patriotism, not national patriotism. Tribal and racial patriotism has been entrenched in the third schedule of the 1995 Constitution, where it has created a certain group of people to be superior to others, while Uganda's rightly so preaches to others that the nation should stop politics of identity, while at home we have entrenched it in the third schedule of the 95 Constitution. This is a gentleman from Al-Ruwa. Finally, good evening. It's wonderful discussion this evening. Thank you, Timothy, for the wonderful show. I am Ivan Reverend Ivan, watching from Chambugo University. I have two questions. How has the interpretation of Uganda's constitution evolved since the enactment? What measures can be taken to strengthen the constitutionalism and the rule of law? Okay. I hope we can respond to those. I'll start with Professor here, Arthur, Honorable Segona, Professor, and finally the Honorable Minister.
I don't know what more I can add, but of course there were very many things people have asked. And I think the discussion about where we want to go as a nation and nation building is a continuous process.
Yes.
We should not just stop at the emblems and the symbols that make us one, but we should be able to actually find a way of cultivating the spirit of nationhood. But as I said earlier, we have to identify where we want to go. And when we do that, I pray and hope that there will be a time where we shall actively fashion that identity and work towards it. When you look a few years ago under Chairman Mao, not Mao, not the Mao of Uganda, the one of China. Yes, Mao Zedong. Yeah, so China did go through a Great Depression. China went through a great famine where even people sold their children for food, or as food. And today, China is a big power because it's clear what it means to be Chinese. You can see how the economy has been fashioned in that direction, how the education has been fashioned in that direction. The prioritization of the state is very clear. So if we are thinking of building a nation state in Uganda and harmonizing the constitutionalism and patriotism to that, we need to find a clear direction of where we want to go, and we trust that those who have been entrusted to rule us for the next 5 years will actually give us that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur, over to you.
Yes, I think for me, my parting shots as a lawyer, I do implore government and the citizens of this country to abide by the laws, what we call rule of law. We believe that rule of law is the cornerstone of any democracy. If we are to achieve and attain all that we are saying, there must be respect of the law. And of course, the issue of civic engagement, this is where we implore government to make massive drives to ensure that there is mass education to the citizens of this country. We do believe that much is going wrong because there is no information reaching out to the common person. And this is where we implore our government. Recently, we saw the shutdown of civic entities which help in disseminating such information. That we do believe if there is that stakeholder engagement, we can actually achieve much as a country.
Thank you. Honorable Segona.
I think all I can say is that in nation building, you do not need to destroy the foundational pillars. The foundational pillars are our definitions, who we are. You make, I think if I may borrow the definition of democracy, was it by Abraham Lincoln? That it is government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Nation building should be for us, by us, and that way we can get a hybrid that preserves the foundational pillars, because if you destroy the foundational pillars, you will face resistance. The second thing, so you find a way of marrying what we have and what we aspire for. The second thing is realizing that this is our country. And in nation building, there is a price and cost. The price and cost would mean and entail self-denial. It would mean and entail give and take. But in the end, it should not be about you. It should not be about me. It should be about us all together.
Thank you very much. Professor Balunyoa.
Yeah, constitutionalism. There are two issues. One is to quieten the quiet voices that are against the Constitution. And to me, those are the Federalists. Defined, I think Professor defined very well. The federal system in the US, when you look at it, it's different from what we're talking about. But here, we're talking about our kingdoms. Can we accommodate them? And we need to talk more about it. The other thing about constitutionalism, where the spirit is, I think, mentioned very well by Noah Segwe now, when it says, can we respect that constitution, all of us? So that's important. But for the nation, so that's something which will underpin the growth of the nation. And patriotism, extremely important, is going to come out if all of us have equal opportunity to access education and resources. What is happening around us is that our ideology as a country, which has been open market system, is creating inequities. Capitalism has a dark side. It has got a positive side. It creates growth. But what is happening to us as Africans in this country is that very soon we shall watch and become slaves in our own country because we are not in the business. So we need to refine our ideological orientation to be able to accommodate Ugandans as patriots and be able, and this is coming through equal access to education, because a large number of Ugandans are not educated. And as long as they're not educated, they will still think about tribe and religion rather than food on the table. So that way, you can never create a patriot who doesn't have enough food on his table.
Thank you. Finally, the Honorable Minister.
Yes, let me conclude this way, that the African countries were colonized, save for Ethiopia, which defeated the Italians at the Battle of Adawa in 1896, and maybe Liberia, which was made free much earlier than the other countries. But the colonialists leaving, they were forced to leave. And I think Ghana was the first country to get independence in 1957. Others followed suit in the 60s, 70s, with South Africa coming late in 1994. But these colonialists never left. So African countries and governments faltered in the first 20, 30 years post-independence. There were despots all over. There were coups and assassinations orchestrated by these neo-colonial powers. You had somebody from Kanungu talk about the instability in Congo from 1961 when Patrice Lumumba was killed. That part of Congo, especially the eastern, has never stabilized. The story is true for many other countries in Africa. It's now in the late 80s, 90s that many countries came back on their feet in Africa, put in the constitutions, put good leadership, governance, and so forth. And Uganda is part of that story, that we had to come back to our feet and try to get a direction, despite what my brother Segona's attitude and feelings are. But Uganda has made progress over the years. And I think what will promote this constitutionalism or patriotism is if Ugandans, despite the diversity that we fall into, if Ugandans have equal opportunity to access services, to access what would contribute to the building of the quality of life of all of us. And in my honest view, NRM has attempted to do that. If you look at education, Museveni came when we had only Makerere, where our professor is here. Now you have universities in all corners of the country. People in West Nile can go to Muni University. No, of course, Muni is not for the West Nilers, even Bashiga there. Karamoja is a university, TES, and so forth and so forth. So as long as we ensure that Ugandans have access to decent services without discrimination, and all our children, whether they are born in Karamoja or West Nile, in Chigezi or Bukedi, have equal opportunity for this, then that will contribute to that strong sense of patriotism and the observance of rule of law and constitutionalism. So my appeal is really that despite our differences, whether it is in the political affiliation, faith, ethnic background, let's all appreciate that we are brothers and sisters as Ugandans, have that strong sense of patriotism. Even when we have disagreements, we should be able to resolve them. We see leaders who run to Europe, to America, thinking the solution will come from these foreigners, these former colonial powers. Those are part of the problem. If you have any challenge, let us address it as Ugandans.
That is where General Museveni went when he was looking for solutions.
No, he went to the bush in Ruwero here.
No,
he never ran to Europe or America.
So you want,
somebody who...
You want them in the bush and England.
Whether we have political disagreements or disagreements of whatever nature, we should be able to find answers as Ugandans rather than running to Europe.
They are not in the bush because they cut the bush.
The bush had Ugandans, not Europeans.
Thank you.
So we really call for that strong sense of patriotism, and we should promote that culture of constitutionalism, and we shall definitely get there. In my view, we are on the right path.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the gentlemen that have been able to come today, and the lady, Professor, for coming through, but I also want to thank the production team for making today possible, especially you who has been watching. Thank you for watching till this late hour, but also I know Eid will be announced soon, and we wish our brothers, the Muslim brothers.
So they announced Friday.
So
Eid Mubarak.
Eid will be on Friday.
Happy Eid Mubarak, but we'll end with this quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast any day. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda. In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda. UBC, inspiring Uganda. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
With established political, economic, and social institutions. The